All right, we are at week 3 of our little coronavirus containment plans. And, well, I finished my project. I have watched every movie on my unwatched shelf that I had left. I got the final 18 sitting next to me. Some of them were good, some of them were average, a lot of them were crap. So let's take a look at what lands where. Again, this will be in the order I watched them in. So yeah, this is just the order in which I decided to view these last 18 films in. So let's take a look. Let's just get started. So first off, we have Entrapment, starring Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones. I found this movie incredibly boring. I figured out what was going on in a few minutes. Like, not even just like, oh, this isn't even, so there may be spoilers peppered throughout this video. So, she's not trying to catch him. She's actually the one who's robbing things. Figured that out. I figured out every twist of this movie. I knew about 20 minutes before it happened. I've never read up about this movie. It was just very obvious. And it just didn't hold my attention. Like, I love Sean Connery. He is a great actor. This is not his A game. It's clear that his A game is starting to fall down at this point, and he's just here for a paycheck. God bless him. He earned his paycheck, I guess. But it's just not a good movie. I didn't care that much for it. And honestly, I could have went the rest of my life without ever watching that movie. All right, next up we have Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. First, I want to talk about the title of this movie. It's a pseudo-sequel to another movie called Bad Lieutenant. It's just called Bad Lieutenant. It stars Harvey Keitel. This one stars Nicolas Cage. Now, the box, there's nothing on it. It's just Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. The movie puts the little dotty things. The term for it has just totally blanked my mind. But it sticks those after the words Port of Call. So it's Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, hyphen, semicolon, hyphen, New Orleans. And in the movie itself, it still has the hyphen. I'm using the term hyphen, and I know I'm wrong. But it's after the word Bad Lieutenant. So I don't know what the actual title of this movie is, because there are many of them, apparently. But it's always Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, just various ways of saying it. Now, what is this movie? Nicolas Cage is a lieutenant in New Orleans. Who'd have guessed? Who's, in drugs. He does drugs. He's a bad cop, basically, a bad lieutenant. He's a bad cop. And it's him trying to solve a murder case while being a bad cop. It wasn't bad. It's one I'm never going to watch again. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a bad movie. It's got some ridiculous moments in it. There's literally a moment where Nicolas Cage is coked out of his mind. A guy gets shot, and he's sitting there staring at it going, shoot him again. His soul is dancing. And it literally cuts to a guy dressed in the same clothes as the guy who got shot, breakdancing until they shoot him again. So it's got some weird crap in it. It's not one worth rewatching. It was kind of interesting at points. Overall, it's an average movie. Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. It was average. If you want to see whack out Nicolas Cage, this is definitely a great movie for it. He gets super wacky in this movie real quick. So, it wasn't a bad movie. All right, next I have Masters of the Universe. This here in my hand is the He-Man live-action movie starring Dolph Lundgren as He-Man and Frank Langella as Skeletor. Frank Langella is a very, kind of more prestigious kind of an actor who is in ugly makeup. He does great in this movie. I'm going to say that. He does great, but the first time I saw his Skeletor makeup, I went, really? That's what we're going with? That's how we're making this? Okay. Overall, this is a pretty enjoyable film. I mean, it's not great by any means. It's like, this is the good kind of bad. This is the kind of bad you sit there and smile at because of how bad it is. This is the kind of bad you eventually get friends over and you watch it and make fun of it, but you're all still enjoying it because it's that kind of bad. I liked He-Man. I like Masters of the Universe. I keep wanting to call it He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, but that's not its title. He-Man was not put anywhere in the. Oh, look. Let's see if I can get. That's kind of. There's that white blobby thing is what Frank Langella's makeup looks like. You couldn't really see it. But look at a picture of it. It's ugly. It is ugly makeup. You get used to it, but it's ugly makeup. Um, Basically, He-Man has to go to Earth, goes to Earth. Skeletor takes over Castle Grayskull and Eternia, and He-Man runs to Earth to try to regroup, and it turns into a big battle. It's a like I said, it's the good kind of bad. It's worth checking out, and it has a rewatch value in it of itself. So we just talked about Frank Langella as the villain in Masters of the Universe. So let's move on to him as the villain in Cutthroat Island. Yeah, this movie stars Gina Davis and Matthew Modine, so it's Pirates of the Caribbean with everything bad. It's all bad. It's a bad pirate movie. Now, people say this is a bad movie. I'll admit I walked into this one going, people say it's a bad movie, but I was hoping it was the good kind of bad. No, this is the bad kind of bad. This is bad in the way that it is just bad. This is not a movie worth watching. I'm saying it. I have now spent the 2 hours with this movie. Don't spend it yourself. Basically, Gina Davis is a pirate. Her dad leaves her a map that's in 3 pieces, and she needs to go see her other uncle. And her other uncle, played by Frank Langella, is chasing her down because he wants the other 2 pieces of the map so they can find the buried treasure. And Matthew Modine knows Latin, and the map is written in Latin, and he gets sold into it's not a good movie. Never watch Cutthroat Island. Seriously, don't. Not the worst movie I saw. Like Cutthroat Island, I still had some amusement with. There's one later. It's bad. Bad. And it's an Oscar winner. So a lot of people really love it. And I thought it was dreck. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Next up, another movie people really love. The Postman Always Rings Twice. This one stars Jack Nicholson and Jessica Lange. It is an erotic thriller. It's actually one of the first erotic thrillers of the age where like Basic Instinct and Fatal Attraction had come out, and Double Indemnity. So it's the start of that erotic thriller. Jack Nicholson plays a wanderer who ends up getting a job at a gas station, falls in love with his boss's wife. They begin screwing. They plot to kill her husband. They end up going to jail. They get out of jail, and so on and so forth. It's boring. Literally, the back description, there are 2 paragraphs on here, and the top paragraph, it's a 2-hour movie, explains the first hour of this movie. The second hour of this movie is left to whatever you want to imagine it can be. And the second paragraph is talking about all the accolades of the people inside this movie. Now, this movie has a great cast. If you want to see a lot of well-known actors and actresses look really young, because this came out in the early 70s, mid-70s, I think, early 80s, somewhere in that land. Yeah, check it out. It's got a lot of, like, Christopher Lloyd's in it, and he looks super young. Angelica Houston is in it. She looks super young. And there's a bunch of other faces I recognized who are in here, and they look very young. But the movie itself, it was just really boring. Like, it never gripped me, and it never brought me to where I wanted to go. It was just, like I said, it's just a super boring movie. You might like it. A lot of people loved that movie. It was great. It was super well reviewed. I didn't care for it. Like I said, I thought it was super boring. All right, next is a movie I kind of liked, Doom Annihilation. It's a movie based on the Doom video game series. I wouldn't, for those of you who watch my normal videos, who watch this whenever you watch it, as there's one person watching right now, hi. Doom Annihilation it's based on the Doom video game series. It wouldn't make my top 10 of the video game lists, but it was good. It was an enjoyable movie. Again, it's the good kind of bad. The good kind of bad always holds a good place for a lot of people. You have a group of space marines. They're going to a moon orbiting Mars to take over and become the new security of that planet. Demons from hell or another dimension escape and are ripping the place apart. They go in and bangity, shootity. People die. One of my favorite parts of this movie, though, is the facility is mentioned that it's in levels. And it openly says every so often in the movie, level 1. And then, they go through level 1 and then level 2. So I liked that it has that, like, at the bottom of the screen where it's telling, it's like a video game. I liked some of the little things they did, and it's an enjoyable hour and a half. I liked it. It was an enjoyable movie. Next, I have The Day After Tomorrow, which I keep wanting to call The Day the Earth Stood Still. But that's a Keanu Reeves movie, and I'm not reviewing that one right now. I'm talking about this one's directed by Roland Emmerich, who obviously he did Independence Day. I didn't mind it. It was interesting to watch once. It's not one I think I'm ever gonna go, man, I want to watch The Day the Earth Stood the day after tomorrow. See, I'm still doing it right now. Even after I make the joke about me doing it, I'm still trying to call it by the wrong title. It's not one I want to go, man, I want to go see The Day After Tomorrow again. It was definitely worth the one watch. It's an interesting movie. It's not accurate at all. There's no way what happened in this movie could happen in reality. But it was an interesting movie. Quick synopsis. The weather predictions are correct, and basically we're entering a new ice age. And it's about what happens to the people who are involved in these areas that are going to be hit the hardest by this new weather phenomenon and this new ice age. And it's about a father trying to rescue his son. Again, it's an interesting movie. It held my attention. It's not one I'm going to watch again, but, it's an average movie. I didn't mind it. I had nothing super wrong about this movie that made me go, why? And I wasn't bored by it. It was an average film. All right, so the next one is a movie with its sequel in the case I'm about to show, but it is, I have to read it, otherwise I'm going to mispronounce this title. Sicario, because I keep wanting to put an N in there. So Sicario, this is just the first one, which is in this case. It's not the sequel. The sequel might be better. I was painfully bored by Sicario. I was painfully bored by it. I didn't find anything super interesting in this movie, though it did continue my belief that John Bethanol only plays in movies if he can only do like 3 days of filming, because he is in this movie. And again, he's in it for like 10 minutes, much like Ford versus Ferrari. And although I haven't talked about it through this site, Baby Driver is another one where he's got decent billing and he's barely in the movie. This is another one of those examples where he's got decent billing and is almost non-existent in the film. I didn't watch the sequel because I didn't care for the first one. But Sicario, it's about drug trafficking through Mexico. Benicio del Toro plays a Mexican hitman working for a cartel who's working with the CIA. Josh Brolin plays the head CIA agent. And Emily Blunt plays an FBI agent who's brought in to learn. It's not that interesting of a film. I was super bored the entire time I watched it. Again, it didn't grip me. It's one of those movies I've heard great things about it, and people go, oh, it's such a good movie. I just didn't see it. I didn't see it when I watched it, and it's just my opinion. It wasn't a great movie. All right, next up, Avengers of Justice, Force Wars. I walked into this knowing it was going to be a bad movie. Kind of like, these two. I walked in knowing it's going to be bad. But is it going to be bad, or is it going to be good bad? This is bad. It's not funny. It's not interesting. The jokes aren't there. For what it is, it's not great comedy. It just kind of sits there and it doesn't go anywhere. It's a farce of superhero films. I really don't want to go into the plot much because honestly, it's nothing super interesting. It tries to be a family comedy while at the same time making fun of superhero. It's not good. It sounds like it should be. I mean, you got, Amy Smart and Shawn Michaels. What could go wrong here? But, it's bad. I took a risk on that one. I knew it was going to be bad, but I hoped it would be ha-ha bad and not why am I watching this bad. It was why am I watching this bad. All right, moving right along. Alita, Battle Angel. I love Robert Rodriguez. I think he's a terrific director. End of the day, I didn't care for this that much. I got into it. I got really into it. It's about a 2-hour film. I got really into it for like the first 45 minutes. I was super into this movie, and then it kept going. And at some point, I hit the realization that the resolution of this movie wasn't going to be at all the resolution it seemed like it was striving for. And it's based on a Japanese manga. And this doesn't cover the whole manga. So I know they're thinking, sequels. But I feel like when it's your first movie, you have to give a satisfying ending. And I just felt like it didn't have it. I just felt like it didn't have a satisfying ending. I felt like it just kind of stopped and it makes you go, oh, if there was a sequel, it would be a fine ending. But because a sequel hasn't come out yet, it wasn't like, we filmed this one. Now here's the sequel, Alita Battle Angel 2, Battling More Angels. I did. I just felt totally let down by its ending. And like I said, the more it went on, the more I just lost interest in this movie. It really gripped me. It really held me right away, and it did. The longer I watched it, the more I went meh, meh. All right, next up, I have Anna. This movie was all right. It's produced by the same guy who does. I'm not going to try to say his name because I'm going to mispronounce it. But he did The Fifth Element and Valerian and the City of a Thousand Worlds. I know I misspoke that one, but I like both of those movies. So I checked out Anna. I thought it'd be like Atomic Blonde. I really like Charlize Theron's Atomic Blonde. I thought it was a super good movie. So I figured this would be in a similar vein. Not a similar like style and look, but just a similar plot vein. And I wasn't far off. Basically, you have a girl named Anna. She is brought into the Russian KGB to become a spy during the Cold War. She's told if she stays in for 5 years, she'll be able to go free. Eventually, she's told, no, you don't go free after 5 years. You're in the KGB. You're in the KGB. And she becomes a double agent and so on and so forth. It's not bad. Again, I'm not going to watch it again, but it wasn't, I had no problems with this movie. It held my interest straight through. You saw what was coming pretty quickly, but it definitely held your interest. Again, it's much like Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. It was interesting. I'm not going to want to watch it again, but it wasn't bad. So, if you're bored for an hour and a half, or I think this is almost 2 hours, it's almost 2 hours. If you got 120 minutes and, you're kind of interested and you liked the idea that Atomic Blonde had, not the field, not the look, but just the general plot of that movie, it's definitely worth checking out. I enjoyed it. All right. Now we're moving on to what I call, they have a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and I didn't like either of them. So first off, we have Errol Flynn in The Adventures of Robin Hood. Last week I mentioned that I'm not sure how I feel about live-action Robin Hood movies that aren't comedic. I don't like live-action Robin Hood movies that aren't comedic. This proves that point, as I didn't. Much like Alita Battle Angel, I got interested in this movie really quick. I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I like it. I'm interested. And then it kept going. And it hit all the plot points you expect from Robin Hood. And then it just kept going. All of a sudden, they were at the archery match where Robin bests the best guy in England. And he's, taken captive. And then he escapes. And there's 40 minutes left in the movie. I always thought that was like towards the end of the story, because it's almost always chronicled as towards the end of the story. But the story just kept going. I think it was a little long. The cast, though, is great. Errol Flynn is great. Claude Rains plays Prince John. There's another actor in here I really like, and his name is Basil Rathbone. He's in one of the Frankenstein movies and a bunch of other stuff. He was a great actor. He plays basically what would become the Sheriff of Nottingham. Although the Sheriff is a character in this movie as well, he is not, Prince John's second. It's actually Sir Guy. I can't remember what the rest of the title is, but he's Sir Guy of something. And he's actually, in this film, what would be the Sheriff of Nottingham. And the Sheriff of Nottingham is his underling, which was kind of weird to see. I didn't mind that. Like I said, the performances were good. I felt it just ran a little long. And it was just kind of blah. It got blah after a while. Like, you got your interest. Robin Hood is, because it got so quick to Robin Hood, banding his merry men together. And then they went out robbing, that you're just like, okay, we're there. I'm right. He's pissed off, Prince John and Guy and Sir Guy. I'm ready for a conclusion. And it just kept going. Not the worst, but this is, it's got a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. This is said to be a great film and a terrific film. I didn't care for it that much. I'm not going to watch it again. It's, out of all the live action Robin Hoods I've seen, this one's my favorite. But that's not saying a lot, because I despise Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and I didn't really care for the one that came out last year, the more comic book action one with Jamie Foxx. I didn't care for that one either, and I've never seen the Russell Crowe one or any of the minor ones that have come out. I mean, Robin Hood Men in Tights is by and far my favorite, but it is comedic. But yeah, It isn't bad. I got bored with it though. So, all right. I've got a small stack left, but luckily I'm hitting the worst right now. This is the worst movie I've watched all this week. Comparing it to the worsts, which were Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and The Snowman. I don't know. Those movies were all so bad. I just feel like they're all wrestling for me to say which one was actually the all-time worst out of all of these. And there's a huge wrestling match. Maybe by the end of this video, I'll have an answer for it. But it is called All About Eve. Again, much like Robin Hood, it's got a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. This movie was nominated and won Oscars. I hated this movie. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. It wasn't just that I was bored. I hated the structure of storytelling of this movie. You're introduced to everything that's going on. It's all a flashback, which is fine. So you're introduced through a narrator, which is great. It's a flashback. A narrator is fine. Except the narrator introduces all the characters, who he is one. The narrator is one of the characters. And then, after he's done introducing everyone, and before the flashbacks start, the narrator changes. And I'm not 100% sure if it changes between Bette Davis or Celestia Holm, who are neither of them are Eve, by the way. Neither of them are Eve. It's all about Eve, and neither of them are Eve. Just so we're clear here, who's ever narrating this thing is not Eve. Okay? I'm going to get to my problem with this title in a minute. So right off the bat, we have switched our narrator. We are introduced to this film, and then we switch it for the flashbacks. And again, I'm not sure which one of them is doing the narration or if they have switched back and forth because their narrative voices do not sound that different. I'm pretty sure they switch back and forth. And that, Bette Davis, eventually that it starts off Celestia Holmes' character because she first meets Eve, and then it's Bette Davis's character, and then Celestia Holmes steps back in. I'm pretty sure the narrator jumps back and forth throughout this movie, and you never really know who the crap is narrating. Okay, so there's my problem with the narrator. The movie is almost 2.5 hours. It does not need to be 2.5 hours. There's a lot in this movie. I've been like, just cut it. We don't need it. Just cut it and get to the point of what we're saying. To sum it up, Bette Davis plays a highfalutin actress who takes an award named Eve. Eve basically is trying to help out Bette Davis's character and be better at what she's doing and help her out and eventually usurps her position. And that's what the movie's about. So it's called All About Eve, but Bette Davis, who is not playing Eve, is the main character. Let's pause that. Is basically the main character. I'll get to my problems with that in a minute. Is basically the main character, and the focus of the most of this movie is on Bette Davis's character, which is fine. I get it, but why is it called All About Eve? It had a different title. It got turned into a Broadway musical. Has a different title. I would have accepted any other title, and I would have accepted the plot of this movie. Wouldn't accept the thing that I'm about to talk. But All About Eve should be about Eve, but it's not. It's actually about Bette Davis's character and her story, and Eve is just there until the last 20 minutes when it freaking changes protagonist. That's right. In the last 20 minutes of this movie, the protagonist changes. Bette Davis's storyline is done. She is done. She has nothing left to contribute to this film. For the last 20 minutes, then it's all about Eve. Eve becomes the main character for the last 20 minutes of the movie. She has perfectly usurped Bette Davis and has become the main character. And most of that 20 minutes isn't necessary. It's not necessary. And there's no clear switch off when Bette Davis's character stops and Eve's character takes over. It just kind of happens. Just like that. It's not smooth. We're in a scene and we're definitely still following Bette Davis, but then we hit a moment where now we're following Eve. No, this scene we're following Bette Davis. We cut to the next scene and now we're following Eve. We have not been following both of them through this entire film. I didn't like it. I didn't like All About Eve. I don't know. From my perspective, the acting wasn't bad in it. I will give it its credit. The acting was good. I just did not care for anything about this movie. I didn't like All About Eve, and for how much outrage I just had, maybe this is the worst movie I've watched in the last 3 weeks. I don't think I had this much outrage with either Prince of Thieves or The Snowman. Um, but there's a lot. This was a perfectly well-made movie, and it just turned out really bad, in my opinion. Again, it's a National Archive. It's on. Both of these are 1,001 movies you should watch before you're dead. I've watched them. I didn't care for either of them. All right. Now we're going to talk about The Price of Fame. This is a documentary made by Ted DiBiase Jr., documenting his wrestling father, Ted DiBiase, and his career and his faith. Ted DiBiase is a Christian. He found God, and he tours schools and churches and prisons and gives his testimony. And apparently, the big point of his testimony is he began to have an affair when he was on the road as a wrestler, and that's how he found God, is by getting the forgiveness of his wife and figuring out he needed that by going through God. It's a great story. I love that story. His first autobiography is his testimony, and it is an amazing book. I love that book. What makes this movie interesting, this documentary interesting, is that Ted never actually sat down with his children and told them this. He's told them his testimony. They know his testimony, but they've never actually sat down and just talked about the adultery and how it happened and everything that happened after the fallout. They never really talked to their father about it. So this was one of his sons, Ted DiBiase Jr., who is also a professional wrestler, sitting down with his dad to talk to him about this. It is a great movie. It's got a lot of interesting segments, a lot of interesting information in here, and it definitely raises up, God, and make sure hey, there is a price to fame, and God will wipe that price away, and there's a better price to pay for God. I liked it. I really enjoyed this documentary. It was worth watching. I want to share it with people because $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase is my favorite professional wrestler. So I'm, really happy that this documentary turned out so great. It also has the last 15 minutes of this movie is just him, Ted DiBiase, talking with Shawn Michaels about faith and wrestling, and it's a really cool moment. It's a great movie, and if you're an person of faith and you want to watch something uplifting, definitely check it out. It's worth the time. All right, next up I have The Devil's Advocate. Don't worry about those two. This one I forgot. I bought this 3-pack. I already own 7 Insomnia. I bought this 3-pack because I really wanted to see The Devil's Advocate, and this was the cheapest way to get a Blu-ray copy of The Devil's Advocate, was buying this 3-pack and then selling off my copies of Insomnia and 7. So it's just been sitting on my shelf. I forgot all about it until recently. I went, oh yeah, Devil's Advocate. I should watch Devil's Advocate because I've never seen it before, and I bought it to watch it, so it fits into the category of everything else. Basically, Keanu Reeves is a lawyer who's brought into New York and is basically, begins to become a lawyer and is enticed by all the sin and corruption. Kind of weird. These are back to back. Sin and corruption of New York and everything else that's going on. By Al Pacino, who is the devil. It's not a huge secret. Al Pacino plays the devil in this movie. I liked it. It was really well done. I think it holds itself well for being a 2.5-hour movie. I never got bored with it. I never wasn't interested in the plot and the story and what was going on, even though there was a lot of different steps in it. Because you have the opening court case Keanu Reeves is prosecuting or defending. He's the defense lawyer. So he's defending the case at the beginning of the movie. And that is what actually leads into him going to New York. He has his first case there. Then he has his big case. Then he finds out, Al Pacino's the devil. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Definitely a recommend. I like The Devil's Advocate. It's one I definitely want to check out again because I'm sure there's some nuances I missed in that movie, and I'm really interested in checking them out. All right. Wonder Woman, Bloodline. This is a DC Wonder Woman movie. It just came out a couple of months ago. It takes place in the huge DC animated extended universe, which I am, some of those movies are good. Some of them are trash. This one wasn't bad. It gets really interesting towards the end. Unlike a lot of, like Alita and what was the other one that held me at the beginning? Alita, Battle Angels, and The Adventures of Robin Hood. Unlike those movies that held me at the beginning, I was a little bored at the beginning of this movie. But let me tell you, by the end, I was super into this movie. The ending of this movie is worth the hour and 20 minutes it runs. It's not a long movie. So I mean, it gets to where it's going really quick, which is always a positive. It's a positive to have that kind of movie. Um, Basically, it's Wonder Woman. It starts off telling her how she got to America because honestly, in the big DC extended universe, they never covered that. She just shows up in Washington. So it covers that in the prologue, and then the movie starts. Actually, the prologue is the first 20 minutes of the movie, which is weird. And then it moves on to the basic story, which is Wonder Woman trying to stop a pair of villains named Dr. Poison and Dr. I can't think of the other doctor. It's Dr. Poison, and there's one other one. And they also work with like Giganta and Cheetah and a couple other DC villains. But trying to stop them from getting to her home world, her home island of Themyscira, and stealing the tech. She also has to deal with the fact that one of the first humans she ever met is very jealous of her and her relationship with her mother, not Wonder Woman's mother, the villain's mother, and dealing with that fact now. I liked it. Definitely, if you like the DC animated movies, check it out. It's definitely worth checking out. All right. Well, I've got my favorite movie I've watched this week. And it might be this one. It's hard because I don't remember what my favorite was of each week. The bad always sticks out way more than the good. But I really liked this next movie, and I'm really surprised it made it almost to the end. It's second to last. There's only one after this, and I'm a little skeptical about talking about the last one. But I've got Secondhand Lions. I've never seen this movie. I never thought much of this movie. I loved this movie. This was such a good story. It was such a well-written and well-told story. Michael Caine, Robert Duvall, and Haley Joel Osment all do amazing jobs with this film. It wasn't too long. It's 109 minutes. And this is a story that you would think they would have pushed to like 2 hours, maybe 2 hours plus. They kept it at 109 minutes. It kept the story going. So you always had a good pace. It was an interesting story. It's great characters. Basically, Haley Joel Osment is a boy who is dropped at his uncle's farm. They're his mother's uncles, so they're his great uncles. He's dropped at his great uncle's farm for the summer. And these are two guys who are deemed crazy. They're deemed kooks. They shoot at traveling salesmen. And it's really a relationship story between the three. It's such a good movie. If you've never seen Secondhand Lions, check it out. I really enjoyed this film. I'm so glad I watched it. Because there was time I was pulling movies out of the shelf where I was going, I'm never actually going to watch this. I have no interest in watching this. I'm really glad this movie didn't get caught in that and that it stayed on. And a lot of people told me this was a super good movie, and that's kind of why it hung on there. And they were right. It was so good. I really enjoyed this movie. All right, I got one left. And then that's it. All of my unwatched movies are watched. My entire unwatched shelf will be cleaned once I one movie to talk about this last movie, and I am very skeptical about talking about it because it's one of those movies that people don't like talking about. It was very controversial when it came out, 1963. No, 73, 1970, 83. I have no idea what year this movie actually came out. I know it was controversial the year it did, 1973. Okay, it's going to be 1973. It is Ralph Bakshi's Coonskin. This is a hard one to talk about. It really is. It is such a controversial film. Basically, Ralph Bakshi made a movie based on the Song of the South stories, but he made it in present day, and he made it very, very honest to how people viewed. He actually went to Harlem and interviewed people and used what they were saying as bits of dialogue throughout the movie. He re-recorded it with the actual voice cast, but he used some of those stories throughout the movie. It was interesting. I enjoyed it. There were some legitimate funny moments in this movie that had nothing to do with it, why it was controversial. Why it's controversial, Well, it deals with African Americans who live in the ghettos of Harlem in the 70s. Um, so, you're talking about gangs and drugs and everything else. Ralph Bakshi, it's a weird style of animation in this film because it is kind of animation over live footage. So he took live backgrounds and animated the characters into it. This is the main character. His name is Brer Rabbit. Brother Rabbit. I'm sorry. Brer Rabbit is who's from the stories that they're kind of adapting here. He's Brother Rabbit in this story. Um, and it's an interesting movie. If you can get over the fact that they probably say the N word in the first 5 minutes of this movie more than in any Quentin Tarantino movie you've ever seen. It's an interesting movie. You also have a character called Miss America, who's literally a woman with the stars and stripes. Basically, looks like it's painted onto her, and it's her interacting with these people in Harlem. Like I said, it's an interesting movie. It's got some legitimately funny moments in it. It is, if you're squeamish, it's a hard movie to watch then. It's not really, violent, or it's vulgar, and it makes a lot of very big statements for the time. Like I said, I enjoyed it, and also it does also have, like I said, it's kind of like Song of the South. That's kind of how Ralph Bakshi presented this movie. It does also have the people who do the voice cast. So you have Barry White, Scatman Crothers. They're the two biggest names in this movie, but the voice cast also doing a live action kind of bookending thing about a guy who's trying to escape prison with an older prisoner played by Scatman Crothers. And this is Crothers telling the story because he's being rescued by two of his friends who all three of them happen to match the descriptions of the three main characters of the movie, and they end up voicing the characters. And Scatman Crothers voices like 8 characters throughout this entire movie. Like I said, it's an interesting movie. I get why I get why it was controversial and why it still stands as a controversial film, but I liked it. I enjoyed Coonskin. So that's it. That's my entire Unwatched shelf. I have now watched a ton of movies during this quarantine, during this safety at home. It doesn't mean I'm probably gonna take a break from watching movies for a little while, just because I have required myself to sit down and watch so many to clear that shelf because I had so many on that shelf. But I think I might take a break and a breather. Wednesday is the new video. I'm talking Star Trek and all the Star Trek films. Definitely check that out. That is an interesting video. I like it. I like all my videos. I think I do a good job. But not to pat myself on my back all I want. So check that out. Otherwise, maybe I'll do another live stream at some point and talk about some other movies once I start watching movies again. But for right now, this is what it is. All right, hit subscribe if you like what you're watching, if you like what you watched. Leave some comments if you have any questions. I love answering questions. And otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Have a good one.